Good evening, good day, wherever you are. I'm Dutch, your host of the Flying Dutchman podcast show here on the YouTube channel. And I'd like to welcome my guest for today is JohnGuetter. John comes to us with an extended background. He was in the United States Air Force for a number of years, and we'll nail those years down with John as we continue with our interview. He served uh, driving trucks, John. Before we talk about the aircraft you're on, what did you join enlisted in the Air Force to do what?
Well, to get out of the house. I didn't have anything to do. I wasn't going anywhere. And I listened to my stepfather, who was in the Navy. And then one of my uncles, I got a long history of family in the military. Most of them, a lot of them, I'd say the major portion of them are Army, a few Navy.
Okay.
And he talked about the Navy, and I just thought that was romantic. I thought that would be a wonderful thing. Get on a boat, you can travel and see the world, and that's what I wanted to do. So I went down and talked to the Navy recruiter. Me and one of my friends. Let's do this. Let's join the Navy. Let's get out of here. There was like no real opportunities at that time. So we were trying to find something, and that seemed like the logical way to go.
Where were you living for high school
Puyallup,
days?
Washington.
Where?
Puyallup, Washington. So Puyallup is, I guess it's east of Tacoma, probably 20 miles. But it's a little enclave, little farm town is how it started, but it's all overgrown and crowded now. But it was a wonderful place to grow up.
Okay.
So I talked to the Navy recruiter.
Yes.
And this guy, and this was before Top Gun or any of that stuff, so we didn't have that influence. I just wanted to be on a boat. I wanted to travel the world. I thought that'd be a wonderful thing. Get out of the house, go see something, go do something. So the Navy recruiter, he wasn't real friendly. He was just trying to get me in. He was just trying to get his numbers up.
Okay.
I didn't like it. So right next door, it said Air Force. So I said, let me go see what this guy has to offer. So this guy actually took me in, worked with me, explained things, and he was more, I guess, more my speed, more to my liking.
Okay.
But here's what he tells me. Here's what we're going to do. How quickly do you want to go in? And they offered delayed enlistment, and then they offered quicker ways to get in. And one of those was if you joined and went in one of the 4 basic fields. There was mechanics, electronics, general, and I can't remember what the other one was. If you went in one of the open fields, here's what he tells me. Here's what you do. You go into open mechanics, you go down to basic training. When you're down there, they'll have like 10 jobs, and you can just pick one. So he made me feel like I get the cream of the crop. I go there, I get to pick my job. And we all know that doesn't work that way. So I go down there, I joined. I had a wonderful time in the Air Force. Didn't have any problem through basic training. I made my list, and it comes up transportation. Not what I expected, not what I wanted. But again, I've always wanted to drive a big rig, drive a truck. I used to go with a guy, and we would deliver tanks and treaters out in the oil fields in Colorado. And then my stepdad, again, was a truck driver. So he talked about driving truck. And I thought that's a wonderful thing. Yeah, you're out. You don't have a boss. You're out on the road. Most flyers and probably tank guys too, we're type A personalities probably. Mm-hmm. We don't want to be sitting in an office. We don't want somebody telling us what to do. We're self-started. We want to go. Yeah. So I thought that would be awesome. So I embraced it. It's a pretty thankless job being in transportation. Nobody really jumps up and down or cares about you until they need you. So, but I got the opportunity to drive a truck and learn how to do that. So I embraced it. So I started out, I got my orders to Tyndall Air Force Base, Panama City, Florida.
Yes.
I didn't know anything about Panama City, Florida. And that was before spring break or any of those kind of things happened. And I showed up, white sand beaches, and it was a wonderful time. I hear all the guys talking about Korea and the Philippines and how much fun that is. And you actually get to drive the rigs and you get to do more. They used to have a thing called Mule Team, where the guys would put things together and they drive around and deliver supplies to the Army posts and to the different places or whatever. And it sounded like a wonderful thing. And then plus the party life there was pretty fantastic from what they were telling me. So the first thing I did is run down and change my dream sheet to the Philippines, everything in the Philippines and everything in Korea. So about a year and a half into my assignment, I get orders to Korea, Kunsan, Korea, and they said, but you have to come qualified being able to drive a big rig truck.
Okay.
Again,
What
I
year
did
is
that.
this?
That was in 1985, actually. I was in Tyndall from 83 to 85. I got my orders and I reported to Korea in 1985.
What month?
It was in February.
Oh,
February
so
or
it was
March,
cold.
85.
So it was still cold over there.
It was very cold. And it was either right before or right after Team Spirit. So that was a big exercise.
Yes.
So we had a defined enemy that time. We kind of discussed this earlier. We had a defined enemy with the Cold War going on. And the DMZ was one of those places where that was the demarcation line between communism and the free world. So it was kind of a different time. Rules were kind of more relaxed. But the thing is, you got the mission done. As long as you got the mission done, they really didn't care how you did it. Just make sure you did it safely. So I'm driving all over Korea in a big rig as a probably 19-year-old kid delivering supplies, and I had a blast, absolute blast. I couldn't believe we would do Air Force supplies, we'd do Army support up by the DMZ. Let's see what else. Like I said, it was kind of relaxed. One of the things in Korea, because you only did it 1 year and it was pretty intense, there were lots of exercises. You come in as a green bean, and they called it a green bean and a brown bean. When you got there, you're a green bean because you're brand new. They showed you the ways of Korea, took you downtown, showed you the party life, and then let you loose for the work environment. 1 year later, when you're getting out of there, you're the brown bean. Then they take you down there and they give you a farewell. Just one of those things that we did in Korea, and it was wonderful.
So your Korean tour was 1 year?
1 year, 1 year remote, and it was pretty intense. One of the things we did when we're driving is because we had to get around, you had to go out with somebody and they would show you how to get to the particular bases. So I had this guy, his name was Patterson. That's all I can remember. Great guy. Him and I ended up being really good friends, but he takes me on. They said, Guetter, follow him. So he's in a big rig. I'm in a big rig, and he's showing me how to get there. We stopped somewhere at one of the little rest stops or whatever. And he goes, all right, so follow me. I said, okay. I said, I don't know where I'm going, so, be easy on me. There was no being easy on me. He took off and he put the pedal to the metal and he was hauling. So I'm jamming gears trying to keep up with him. And I was freaking out to myself and I'm going, why is he going so fast? I can't find him. But I was driving like a wild man to keep up with him. Come around a corner one place and I lost him for a moment and I find him. I come around a corner and there's some Korean people going across the street, some sort of procession.
Ooh.
Yeah. And I blew right by him, and then he stopped at the next rest stop. So he's sitting there smoking a cigarette, and I pulled up, and I'm like, "What are you doing? Why did you take off like that?" And he goes, "John, the only way you're going to learn to drive around here is if you get out there and you move." And that's why I did it. He goes, "That's how people taught me. That's how I'm teaching you." And he goes, "By the way, you realize that was a funeral procession that you just blew through?" And I said, "I did not realize that." But yeah, so that's one of the crazy stories. Another one I can tell you was we'd be driving down the road and there was 2 or 3 of us together and we had some cocktails left over from the night before. One guy pulls up and he rolls his window down and he goes, "Pass me a beer." So my passenger, we're cruising down the highway. He's passing him beer back and forth. Yeah. Crazy stuff. Another thing I can remember when I was in Korea, you go to a certain spot, you're driving down the freeway and all of a sudden it would just widen out. I mean, super wide. Not more than 4 lanes. I mean, it was probably 20 or 30 lanes wide, but there would be barriers and then it looked like a great big billboard. So what it was is during a contingency, if they needed to, that would work as a auxiliary airport. So they would move the road barriers back, the airplanes could land and they could park there and make that an airport. And the big billboard, they drop the sides and that becomes the control tower.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then another thing, they said that the tunnels were charged on both ends. So if the North is marching south, to stop them from getting through, they would just blow that tunnel and stop that progression on that side.
Wow, a defined enemy.
The Korean people, when I was in Korea, I loved the people. A lot of people, I'm not going to seem to treat them different as, I don't know how to put this or whatever. I embraced it. I embraced their culture. I enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. And if you took care of the Korean people, they would take care of you. I remember specifically one time, a guy and I were out driving, and I looked in my rearview mirror, and he's got a flat tire. I stopped my rig. I turn around. I come all the way around, and I pulled up behind him and helped him change his flat tire. He never had no American GI ever do anything like that for him. So him and I became really, really tight because he took that as a sign of real respect.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, that's my stories on Korea. So after Korea, I had a follow-on to RAF Chick Sands. And this year was 1986 to 88 is when I was there.
Chick
Sands, no longer there. It was a small electronic security group. So they had this thing that was called, it was a great big antenna.
Mm-hmm.
They called it the elephant cage. This thing was huge. I don't know what the measurements on it were, but it was a great big array. Okay. And what they did is they would go up there and they were doing top secret stuff. They were monitoring all the communist countries, the Russians or whatever. We were just a support base or a support function in that aspect. So what we did is we supplied them with, it was a really small, tight unit, and we just kind of supplied them with the stuff that they needed. So there was a small supply contingent, small transportation contingent, you know, and the little things that they needed to ensure that that was taken care
of. That you know, we're familiar with Marham, Lake and Heath, Duxford, but I've never heard of this little base. An important job it was too.
What's that?
It was an important job.
Very important. I actually had, my orders had been changed before I actually got there, but nobody told me that. When I showed up, the boss man, my boss at the time, Tech Sergeant Palmer, he said, well, he's got orders. He goes, I know your order's been canceled and you're supposed to be going to Alconbury, which thank God that I ended up there.
What was your enlistment for driving? How long was that?
I did that from 83 to 88. So what, 5-6 years?
But,
about 6 years.
But you eventually went on to aircraft and you became a tail gunner on a B-52H?
That's correct.
And for the audience, when I say B-52, we all know that, but when I say H model, it differentiates in the engines that they use, and the tail gun was a 20 millimeter Vulcan as opposed to a quad 50 caliber that the DFG models carried.
Correct.
I want to know, how did you go from driving a truck to being a crew member tail gunner on a B-52? How'd that happen?
We would take crew members and take them out to the airplanes and drop them off different times or pick them up when they needed to be picked up. And I used to see the enlisted guys loading planes, unloading planes, refueling planes. And I just thought they have one of the most incredible jobs in the Air Force. And eventually I want to do that. But your time in the Air Force, you can cross train only a certain amount of time. So when I was in England, it happened to work out. That was my time to cross train. So I went down and looked and I applied for everything that was in the flying roll. And it just so happened that B-52 gunner came up.
Oh.
So where are we going here? So B-52 gunner. So it had to match with the time that you were leaving overseas, and you had to have a class that matched up. So it just so happened that I got a B-52H model defensive aerial gunner slot to Fairchild Air Force Base, which happened to be Washington State, where I came from.
Nice.
And grew up. Yeah, and it worked out great for me. I thought it was wonderful. My boss at that time, he had actually come from Wert Smith Air Force Base, I think, in Michigan, which was another, during the Cold War era, there were tons of B-52 bases around because we were part of the nuclear triad. We carried the nuclear-laden bombers, you had the ICBMs, and then you had the subs, which carried their nukes too.
Mm-hmm.
So they were all over, but he had been there. So he told me, he goes, your cross-training slot come down. And he goes, how do you feel about being a B-52 gunner? I didn't really know. I knew a little bit about it, but he was telling me the things and the privileges that you got. He goes, number one is you get free reign to drive all over base because we had a response time. So we had a vehicle. And if we had to respond, then we had to be to the airplane within a specific amount of time. He goes, when you go to the BX or you go to the chow hall, you're first in line because you're alert crew. He goes, you're treated with a lot of respect and dignity. So I thought it was a thing.
Yeah.
So I transitioned back to the United States from England, and this was 1988. I did this from 88 to 92. And again, it's been 33 years since I did this, but when I was going through this, I'm making notes, and it actually brought up a lot of old memories, I guess.
Uh-huh.
So let's see. First thing we do was, as a gunner, as a flight crew member, some of the things that you have to do is, one of the things that I had to do first was, because we sat on ejection seats, we had to go through a water survival class down in Florida. So it was 3 days long. The first one was all academics. This is what you do when you're in the water, and this is how you survive, and this is how you procure water and whatever else. The second day, they would actually take you out in the water, and they would show you certain things, like if the parachute landed over you, how you find the seam and you work your way so you can get off from underneath the parachute, how you deploy your LPUs, and LPUs are life preserver units that we would carry on with this, and some other things. And then the last day, they actually took you out on a great big boat. So the Air Force, a lot of people don't know this, Air Force had 2 or 3 Air Force navies where there were Air Force guys that would actually do marine type activities. And one of them is they would put us on this boat with a great big parachute, and then this other little boat would take off and the parachute would inflate. We'd go above that, and I think we were close to 500 feet in the air. Wow. And you'd see this little tiny boat below you, and this guy would wave the flag, and then you would unclip from him, and then you were free falling with your parachute, and then you went through, there was a procedure to make sure that you were safe when you landed in the water. First thing was canopy. I remember all this because drilling into your head. There's canopy, visor, mask, seat kit, LPUs, and I can't remember the rest of it, horizon or whatever, and then land. And you land in the water, you have your LPUs deployed, and then you had your life raft with you. And of course, the life raft they give you had a hole in it, so you'd have to patch that thing up first and then blow it up, and then you would have to get in the life raft, and then you would have to call a helicopter in, and then he'd come in and pick you up. And it was actually pretty cool training for an Air Force school. So that was one of the first schools we went to. The second one was SEER. And so basically SEER was ground survival was the basis of it, the first portion. So everything about it was, if for whatever reason you were lost in your airplane or you crashed your airplane and you're on the land, this is how you're going to survive. This is how you build a shelter. This is how you procure water. This is how you're going to find food. This is what you're going to do. That was the first portion, land survival. And then they would take you out in the field and teach you land survival. The second thing was, since it was in the Cold War, we always had to think about evasion, because if we went down into unfriendly territories, we would have to evade our captors first. So then
they want a piece of your ass.
Oh yeah, they would teach you how to evade. So how do you evade without getting caught? And I guess the biggest emphasis there was, take your time, do a good job, because even though it sucks out here and you're by yourself and you may not have a lot of food and it may be cold or whatever, it's a hell of a lot better on this side than it would be on the other side if they captured you. So they teach you that evasion. The next thing they do is they teach you resistance. So if you were caught, how are you going to resist? How are you going to keep from giving up the secrets? And then the last thing was how to escape. So that's another school that we had to go through.
As a gunner,
yes.
How privy were you to the mission set that aircraft might have been on when it was down?
Okay, so one of the things we had to do to get qualified in our B-52 mission was you would actually learn to fly the airplane. Once you were proficient at flying the airplane, our basic role was as an alert aircraft. So there would be 6 airplanes, and they call it a tree. Mm-hmm. And they were lined up by the runway, and we had a little shack that was somewhat hardened, and we had all the necessity that we needed.
The mole hole?
Yep. And there were 4 flights, and every week one flight would be sitting there waiting to launch their airplanes if the Russians went berserk or did something crazy. So part of that was they called it certification. So as a crew, we collectively went into the vault, which is where all the secrets are, which was all the missions that were laid out for that time and what was to be conducted from our base, and you would study those missions. So if the balloon went up, if we went out, if we launched the airplane, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take off from here, and they normally had 10 tankers that were assigned to us to give us fuel to top us off so that we could go. And then they would tell us, you're going to go here and you're going to bomb this electric facility, or you're going to go here and take care of this or this, and then try to get more fuel and then come back. So we knew the PSYOP plan at that time, and actually it was laid out.
I see. What well, I'm not sure if the weapon load that you would carry were short range attack missiles, SRAMs.
They had SRAMs, yep, short range attack missiles. There were certain other missiles loaded up. I'm not exactly sure how much of that, and if each one was different, and they could actually take care of that.
Okay, and if I understand it correctly, maybe I'm wrong, but in some instances, the SRAM would actually be used to deny the air defense of the enemy by utilizing the SRAM to kick a door in, basically, so you could go in. Yeah. Now, you didn't go to Washington State directly after you completed your survival, after you completed your escape and evasion. When did you go to Castle Air Force Base?
You have to go to Castle, yeah. So all the strategic training for bombers and tankers was done at Castle Air Force Base. So I went there, I think it was in May 1989, and that's approximately 5 months.
That's it?
Yep, they put you together as a crew. So it'd be a pilot, co-pilot. There was always an electronic warfare officer and the gunner. We were the defense, and then there was a radar navigator or bombardier, and then a navigator. And collectively, as a crew went through, we would learn the basic system stuff. We would learn the flying stuff. And then at the end of that, we'd get a check ride and then go back to our station. Once we got to our station is when we learned because there were some, at that time, there were also some conventional stations. I think Guam was one of them. I can't remember what the others were, where they did not do alert, but they did conventional missions with conventional warfare at that time.
Then you said that you guys were crewed up. Did you stay with the same crew while you were stationed?
No.
Okay.
So during training we did, and then when we went back, once you got qualified on the aircraft, then they would put you on a specific crew. So there were 4 flights, A, B, C, and D, and then each one had so many crews, and they were hard crews. And there's a reason for that. They put the hard crews together because you got to know the intricacies of each guy, his strengths and weaknesses, and you could work with them.
Okay. Did you ever have a chance to fire?
Yes.
Where was that at?
We would go out and we would do live fire. They would do that once a year, if I recall right. So we would go out. It was basically for the function of the guns. And it was for the maintenance guys, too, to make sure that everything was up to speed. And then to give us practice what we're doing. And then we'd come back and we would do strange field disarming, just like if you landed somewhere and you didn't have the maintenance capabilities. Okay. So we would actually go out and we'd go across the water, make sure it was clear. We'd drop chaff. We'd lock onto chaff. And then we'd call for clearance to fire, and then we'd fire the gun.
Can you, with you used a radar blip and all that for your tracking, but could you feel the gun firing, or could you hear?
Oh yeah, most definitely.
You could.
Fire, and what was that? Gain a knot or two. It actually you gained a knot or two of airspeed when the thing was firing. I remember specifically in the book too, and I thought this was kind of funny because it wouldn't apply to us, but one of the things in the gunner manual says, do not use marine life forms as targets. And I'm assuming it's because the B-52, the D model guys had the visual and they could see somebody obviously popped a whale at one time or two and probably rolled up on a beach and they found
Well, Air Force manuals are written because something happened, not written in case.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm learning that. So do you know the rate of fire was
4,000 rounds a minute, but we only carried, I think, 700 rounds. So there was a dial on the H model, and you could actually dial how many rounds per minute or how many, what the burst was. So you keep it down because you didn't need it. Here's the thing, Dutch, I was going to touch on too. When we went to Castle, they were all G models. So we actually checked out in G models. So I actually flew the G model too. And then when you went to your specific base, you were either on Gs. There weren't a whole lot of H model bases. We would have to go through difference training, which we did at Carswell Air Force Base. And then we'd go fly the H's at, Fairchild.
I think during Desert Storm too, the H models were held back for nuclear alert, whereas the G models were put into the ALCM conventional loadouts.
That's correct. They would use them conventional only. Yeah. So they didn't want the alert or the nuclear birds flying during the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the H model is still flying today, and they actually were the ones with the lowest airframe hours on them of all the models of 52. Mm-hmm. Now, people might think that, oh, you're a tail gunner on B-52, so if you're not shooting the weapon, you're not doing nothing. But that's not true, is it?
There's a lot of things that we did. So we worked collectively with the electronic warfare officer. Both of us faced rearward.
And you were up on the upper deck behind the pilot.
Correct. Okay. With the ejection seats, both of us. And then we worked the defense of the airplane. I remember one guy that I had, he had a tendency to get airsick. So we would be doing ECM runs where he'd be doing his jamming stuff, but he'd be throwing up in a bag. So I would take over his duties and I'd be calling the threats and doing what I had to do there to help him out. And sometimes we would back up the pilot with navigation and whatever else. One of the other things, I did come up with a funny story I was going to tell you. So we, being the only enlisted guy on a crew full of officers, it was our duty to go pick up lunches whenever we flew local. So everybody would order and then I would go pick up the lunches and then we'd show up to go fly. I showed up one time and I said, hey guys, I got lunches. I need $1.25, I think it was at that time. I need $1.25. And my radar navigator at that time didn't have any money, or he had 30 cents or something. He goes, I'm going to give you 30 cents, but I expect you to get me a lunch. And I just thought that was weird coming from a major, an officer. Yeah. Telling the enlisted guy, the staff sergeant, he's going to get lunch because he only had 35 cents. So I told him I eat up. So we're a tight crew. Everybody knows how everybody acts. I go, hey, this guy only gave me 35 cents and he expects a full lunch. He goes, come here, I'm taking care of this. He goes, give me his box lunch. So in the box lunch, he had a couple of sandwiches, and then you always had a bag that had celery, carrots, and I think he had a couple hard-boiled eggs. He took out the hard-boiled eggs and he took out the sandwiches, and he left the vegetables in there, the carrots and the celery. So we get up, we're airborne or whatever. And I said, hey, I'm going to pass out lunches, and I passed out everybody's lunch. And this guy liked to eat, so he opens his box and he goes, hey, I ain't got no sandwiches, nothing. All I got is celery and carrots in here. And then about that time, my electronic warfare officer, who was my other teammate, piped up. He goes, yeah, I got some sandwiches for sale up here. So, and we were playing that off. But it's one of the things I wanted to share.
Did you use, because you had a rear-facing radar, right, that you used in conjunction with the weapon? Did you ever use that just to let the aircraft commander know that, hey, number 2 is at your, 630 at this range, just so he could get a visual of what's behind?
So we would actually do station keeping exercises also.
Okay.
And this was in case the guy behind you maybe lost his radar and you're in the weather, or we would keep him spaced. So we would actually give them calls. Number 2 is 8 o'clock in 2 miles or 3 miles or whatever, and we would call that station keeping so that we could keep the formation in line.
Yeah, that's the aircraft that you flew on for age-wise were built in the late 50s, early 60s. These models?
Let me see. I think I even found this in one of the notes. When were they built? It was something crazy. 1952 to 1962, every one of them were built. So there were modifications after that, but every one of the airframes was built in a 10-year period.
Have you attended any air shows since you've gotten out that had a B-52 present?
Um, no.
I just wondered. I was going to ask is the nostalgia that you're because these are H models still flying.
Mhm.
Odds are that your aircraft is out there at there's only two Air Force bases with the exception of Guam where the 52s are Barksdale and Minot. And I just wonder, how nostalgic that would be to walk around and remember those times that you had to climb in it. And because your mission sets were long. I mean, you had some long missions, I'm sure.
So I even made a note of that too. We used to fly 14-hour locals,
Local.
local. So I would park my car 4 o'clock in the morning and it wouldn't be back to get in my car till 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And that was just doing the local, going out and doing the practice things that we needed to do. And some of those things we would normally do a refuel or 2 refuels. So the
Mm-hmm.
pilots would get used to refueling. We do high ECM runs for the electronic warfare officer or low ECM runs. We would do a couple of bomb runs so that the navigator and the radar navigator could practice their things. We would do navigation legs where they would practice that kind of stuff. And it was busy. We did a lot of stuff, but 14-hour locals.
So were you able to get up, walk around, stretch your legs? Did anybody?
No, the only place there you could actually stand vertically in the B-52 is on a small ladder that goes from the lower section to the upper section.
Okay.
You can kind of hunch over, but you can't stand 100%
Uh-huh.
upright unless you're on the ladder.
Oh, I see.
And there's only one little piss can, and that's right behind the navigators. And that's the thing that everybody used. I honestly don't know what they use now that the females are flying. I don't know how they accommodate that. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that with the removal, they no longer have a tail gun. That was taken out.
Correct.
Um, that's a lot of weight to remove. Did they to keep the center of gravity true? Did they add weight to the back of the aircraft to
It seems like
compensate?
they did, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, that's something I have to look into.
I'm
I'm
not
not going to
100%
continue
sure.
to say.
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. And how long? Well, here's this. What was your rank when you were on the 52s?
Staff sergeant.
Okay. Were there airman first classes on?
There were airman basics that come into the career field straight out of basic training, and yeah, and they would run those guys.
Now, I'm going to be sharing you and behind you, you've got on my right the 141B, you've got the KC-10 and then the 52.
Correct.
Is and I'm going to share you graciously provide me with a lot of photographs
Mm-hmm.
and there's a couple photographs that's interesting and one of them is it's perhaps your squadron at the nose of a 52 and there's two young ladies above everybody under the
Good
cockpit.
one.
What's the
So here's
story
how that
behind
come
that?
about.
Yeah.
So again, well, since the wall came down, when the wall came down, 1989, I think I looked that up when the wall came down and things were
Uh-huh.
changing. Reagan was the great president, and we were collapsing the Cold War and whatever else. So we went from being the he-men in the military to a kinder, gentler. Things started to change. So the two ladies came about was the squadron had a function. I think it was a dining in of some sort. So dining in is where the whole squadron comes together. Everybody's in uniform. They can bring their family members, and then it's like a function. It's a get together.
Uh-huh.
So they had a couple ladies there in scantily clad clothing, and they walked around. I think they were cigarette ladies, is what they were.
Oh yeah.
They were selling cigars or something like this.
Oh, bless her
Somebody
heart.
from I think it was one of the papers in Spokane Review, or one of the papers. There was somebody who was there and got a hold of that and wrote a big story that this squadron had got together and they had scantily clad women that were running around during the squadron function, which they didn't think was proper. So, as I guess a spoof to them, we got some scantily clad women and we got some pictures taken so that so that's where that came from.
Oh, okay. Just so you know, that photograph is up as we spoke on that.
Okay.
And then there was perhaps it was a graduating class. There was a bunch of gentlemen at the tail of a B-52D black belly bomber. What was that photograph?
So that is all the gunners at the time from Fairchild when they closed our career field. So I'll tell you a story is we were out and we were flying somewhere. Seems like we'd landed at Barksdale Air Force Base. We get in a crew bus and he goes, yeah, I got one more crew to pick up. And he swings around, he picks up a KC-10 crew. I think it was one of the guys that I ended up flying with on KC-10s later, Tom Sterninsky, I believe it was. He gets on, he goes, you guys B-52 crew? Yeah. He goes, hey, Gunner, what are you going to do now that you guys are going to be, that you guys are axed? I'd never heard anything about this. I didn't even know what he was talking
That's
about.
how you heard about it?
That's how I heard about it, from a KC-10 crew member. So I said, what are you talking about? He goes, yeah, come up fiscal year. He goes, gunners are gone. And I go, I couldn't believe that. So I went directly back to my squadron gunner and I said, hey, this crew member told me that B-52 gunners are going to be gone. He goes, John, they've been saying that for the last. Now, I don't know if he knew and he just wasn't saying anything, which it probably was, or maybe he didn't know either. He goes, John, they've been saying that about B-52 gunners forever and ever and ever and ever. And he goes, don't worry about that, press on. So I blew it off and thought everything was good. Come to find out, a couple of months later, we get a notification from the SAC guys that, hey, this era is ending. I got this right here. I was going to show you too. I don't know if you can see it. So this is a letter that was addressed by the each individual gunner got one of these, and it says that there's a proud heritage of the aerial gunner, and it spans the era, B-17, whatever. Anyway, so it was signed by the general commander of Strategic Air Command, saying that, hey, we're gone. So
was that a red scarf that I saw in that?
Yeah, it was. So this was our. So this is the letter that we got from the general. This is our squadron scarf and name tag, and then these are my wings, and then everybody carried a gunner coin at that time, which is the bulldog coin. This though, they took care of us at that time. Again, they took care of us because the guy says, here's what we're going to do. We're closing down cross training across the Air Force, closing it down until this group of guys is taken care of and they get the jobs that they want.
Well, that's very good.
It was very good. I don't think they would do that nowadays. And then the other thing he said was, if you guys want to fly and there's not a position available for you, we'll make a position available for you, or we'll put you in that career field till we find a position for you. It was great. I can't complain. It was wonderful. And I'll tell you why they got rid of the gunners.
Yes, please.
Because the Cold War was collapsing or whatever. One thing they did when I went through gunner school, they told us that they were actually coming up. They were actually trying to mount missiles to the back of the B-52 that they could launch. But every test mission, I guess, when they would drop it off in the airstream, because we're going forward and the missile would be going rearward, there was too much forward momentum, so the thing would just tumble. And they could never figure out the logistics of it. So we didn't have that. And the other thing, think about this, as airplanes, it wasn't World War II. So as airplanes advanced, munitions advanced, if we went, one of the things that we would have to do is fighter study and figure out what fighters that we would be hitting on a certain route. The advanced fighters could actually hit us beyond visual range.
Okay.
Before we even see this with the radar missile. Then if he lost all of his radar or launched all of his radar missiles, then he would come in behind and he would actually convert to an IR pass against the engines, and he'd have to get in close. I think it was 3 miles or something like that. He was still beyond the range of our gun. If he blew all of his infrared missiles, then he would actually convert to a gun pass. So for us to actually engage was pretty obsolete at that time with the advancement of all the missiles. There's only two MiG kills during Vietnam, and that was Staff Sergeant Sam Turner and then A1C Albert Moore. And those guys got confirmed MiG kills, but since then it was really nothing.
Have you ever met those gentlemen?
No.
Okay.
Nope. I don't recall what the stories were before them. Some of the guys in my career field had.
Yeah, I believe it was MiG-21 kills.
Correct.
During linebacker missions. So now you're given an option. Hey, we're going to take care of you. If you want to still, and you want to still remain on aircraft in a flying status.
Yes, most definitely.
Well, we're going to stop the interview right there because we're going to start talking about the next airframe that John was trained on and assigned to. The B-52 tail gunners were going away, and if you look at this picture, those that are able, you can see the tail gun, the 20 millimeter Vulcan, has been removed from these B-52Hs. If you're curious about the tail letters, the one in the background, BD, identifies it as belonging to Barksdale Air Force Base, and if you look above it, you can see black lettering AFRC. That's the Air Force a reserve command that is operated by a reserve crew, not a full-time crew, with some exceptions. The one in the foreground here with the OT, that is from the 49th Test and Evaluation Squadron, and they are sometimes at Edwards, sometimes you'll see them at Eglin, sometimes you'll see them at Nellis, but I think they are stationed at Nellis, but I might be wrong. But anyway, that's what that picture's about. So it was kind of an abrupt stop. John was a fantastic interviewee, and we went long. And I didn't want to edit a lot of stuff. I try to keep my shows an hour or less. But it was such a good interview, and I learned a lot, and I enjoyed the interview. And I think that you will too. So I'm splitting this into 2 episodes. So in a couple of weeks, I'll be releasing the follow-up interview that John shares, not 1, but 2 different platforms while in the Air Force. So I hope that you join us there. Like and subscribe, and you can always send me an email at dutch@flyingdutchmanpodcast.com, and I'm on Instagram too. Okie dokie. Let's go.